Today we actually have Mohammed El-Kurd himself, the Palestinian author, the activist who through social media has been keeping an extremely detailed record of what's happening in his neighborhood. Mohammed, thank you so much indeed for your time. You were arrested for rioting. What were you actually doing?
Thank you, Adnan, for having me. We were arrested on charges of inciting violence against the police, and clearly anybody with working eyes can see that we were not inciting violence, but instead protecting our homes. What happened is that the Israeli occupation authorities are trying to intimidate us, are trying to terrorize us. And this is not just happening to us, it's happening to thousands of Palestinians across colonized Palestine who are getting arrested. So just today, two 17-year-olds were arrested from Sheikh Jarrah, and the campaign of law and order of mass incarceration continues. This is a tactic of instilling fear in Palestinians who refuse to be ethnically cleansed, who refuse to be violated by the Israeli occupation courts. But we will not be intimidated, obviously.
Do you think the Israeli security forces now have you down as a marked man, and your sister also, because of what you're doing? Because going out onto the streets is something that they can confront directly. If you go through social media and tell the world what's happening, they can't stop that unless they move against your accounts.
Well, just to be accurate, they're not security forces. This is an internationally recognized occupation. So they are occupation forces that are illegally present in our neighborhoods. And they're not keeping anybody secure, and they're not defending anybody. And of course, they have us locked down, and we're worried about this is certainly not going to be the first time we get detained. We are anticipating more and more. I even had to sign on a bail that declared that I will be called into questioning more times. We are waiting. We don't know what they have in their pockets, but we know that we're not doing anything that's illegal, and that we know that their presence under international law is within itself illegal, and their presence in our neighborhoods is what is incitement of violence, not our response, not our defending of our homes.
Mohammed, is there any pushback from Israeli settlers or right-wing groups of citizens, or is it really the confrontation coming from the occupying forces, those who arrested you and your sister?
Yeah, there's a lot of partnership, I would say, between the settlers, who are mostly armed, and Israeli occupation forces. The ones who are committing the violence are both of these parties, oftentimes together. We saw in Hebron a few days ago a man be beaten up severely by the Israeli forces, and then have the settlers protect the Israeli forces and prevent any medics from reaching him. And we see the situation in Sheikh Jarrah, where settlers can just point at us and then have Israeli police officers come and assault us and arrest us. We see this by the fact that we are not allowed into our own neighborhoods. We're supposed to show our IDs. We're supposed to prove our presence in the neighborhood. Yet Israeli settlers, often armed with their rifles or knives or pepper spray or gas, can just walk into the neighborhood, no question. So this is state and settler collusion. This is two fronts working together, doing the same thing with the purpose of ethnically cleansing the native Palestinian population. And I think the world is finally opening its eyes to that fact, that this is not just the acts of the government, it's whatever institution of the government or private that is inciting and continuing to uphold this colonial violence that is uprooting us from our lands.
You will have seen, I'm sure, the pictures from around the world over the past few weeks of solidarity marches, pro-Palestinian demonstrations taking place. Now, you've said that the world is seeing, and I get that, but who do you think is actually going to make sure that you can live where you want to live, that you in an occupied land should be able to stay in a residence? Some of these families have lived there for decades and decades. It's not going to be the people who are marching in New York or the people who are marching in London or Tokyo. It's surely got to be international actors and states that take action. Do you see anything that gives you hope in that regard?
Absolutely, I agree. I think the international community has allowed Israel to behave with impunity for far too long, and that these countries, these international actors, are often fascist within their own rights, or they are settler countries also within their own right, independent of their support of the Israeli apartheid and settler colonial regime. But I believe that there are people on the ground that can do the work to push and change their governments, to better the living conditions, the liberation status of the indigenous populations within their own countries, of the minorities within their own countries, and force their countries to apply pressure and sanctions on Israel. Our approach to this is an internationalist one. We understand that we are all somehow tied in a similar struggle for liberation, no matter in Colombia, no matter in the United States, in Turtle Island, no matter here in colonized Palestine. So I think that's the game changer. And I believe in the people to continue uprising and continue protesting everywhere in the world until the international actors do their job.
Mohammed, there's a very fine balance between bravery and fear. How do you feel about the campaign that has made you pretty much world famous? I mean, as I indicated before, you may well now be a targeted person regarding how the occupying forces treat you.
I mean, I'd like to see what they have in store for me. I'm not the first one or the last one who's been detained, who will be detained. I'm not the first one whose home was stolen by the Israeli government working in collusion with US registered settler organizations. If I'm a target, I might as well be a target. Our silence, we learned that our silence, remaining silent about what's happening, is not going to protect us. People get shelled and bombed for just sitting in their bedrooms. So I might as well, if I have a voice, if I have a platform, I might as well use it for the justice and the liberation plight of my people.
Mohammed, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us on TRT World and telling us your story. Mohammed El-Kurd speaking to us from occupied East Jerusalem. Take care.